which was an absolute giant slap in the face because I was a young kid thinking, oh, I know how to do this. I can take care of this, no problem. I jumped in with both hands and feet into the business world and realized real fast that I was about 80% short of the knowledge and the training and the experience that I needed to do what I needed to do.
You are listening to the Go Earn Your Salt podcast, brought to you by Salt Electrolytes. On this podcast, your host Riley Rogers, that's me, explores the stories of people who get after it, get things done, and earn their salt. You will hear from high achievers who discuss what makes them tick, how they got to where they are today, and where they are headed tomorrow. Perhaps this podcast will help you go earn your salt. All right, you guys, this is my friend Matt Spears. We grew up together. We were childhood friends, all through elementary, junior high, and high school, huh?
For sure. Long time running.
Yeah. So I invited Matt on here today because Matt he's got a really cool story. He's a successful entrepreneur, got a lot of irons in the fire, a lot of different things that he's done over the years, and I've been kind of fascinated by it. There's been some exciting times and some not so exciting stuff, and some just heartbreak and tragedy in there that has happened over the years. And just a little bit of background. I talked about Matt and I growing up together. We had a spurt during adulthood where we didn't see each other for a long time and didn't really talk much. But here in the last couple of years, we've become kind of reacquainted and gotten to hang out quite a lot. And so yeah, I'm really looking forward to having him on the episode today. Matt, welcome, dude.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hopefully
Yeah,
this
man.
this is exciting as you're hoping for. He
Yeah,
says
no, I think your story is awesome.
he
Yeah,
says I've got a good story, but it's just a story.
yeah, that's what everybody says. It's just your story, right?
That's right.
But listen, there's some things. So I talked about us growing up together. We were in the same neighborhood, just probably lived what, quarter mile apart.
Yep.
All went to the same elementary school. We had a lot of the same buddies growing up in the neighborhood. But one of the things I remember is you were always a guy who seemed to different than me. I was a little bit, what would you call it? I didn't get along with everybody, but you seemed to get along with most people.
I tried.
Yeah. Was that something you consciously did, or was that just kind of part of who you were, or was it something that where'd that come from?
I would probably say it's 50% intentional and 50% unintentional. And I say it that way because I did make a conscious effort to try to be cordial with everybody. And in turn, I mean, you always say you want to treat people like you want to be treated. And so that always stuck with me too. So part of it was intentional, just trying. And then a lot of it was just, it's just who I was and it's who I wanted to be. And it just came out in my personality, I guess.
Yeah, you more than probably anyone else that I can think of off the top of my head seem to kind of cross those planes. Had all these different groups of kids in the neighborhood, and you would fit with any of them.
Had a lot of diversity in my friendship group, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So that's gonna come into our conversation a little later on how that, how that it'll tie in later. We'll just put it that way. So that's the reason I asked that question. Now, you grew up your whole life in Pocatello, right? Because I remember we became friends kind of middle elementary school.
Yeah.
Were you born there?
Yep, born and raised in Chubbuck, Idaho, which is the subsidy of Pocatello. And I mean, I moved several times, had different houses, whatnot, but I always stayed in the Chubbuck area.
Dude, it's funny you say that because it just occurred to me as you said you're from Chubbuck. I always say I'm from Pocatello because no one knows where Chubbuck's at, right?
Correct.
But yeah, I was, gosh, 4 months old when my family moved to Chubbuck, and that's where I lived my whole growing up. So,
Good place to grow
funny.
up.
Yeah, it was great, man. We had a neighborhood with a ton of kids, and so we always had something to do out there building dirt bike ramps and playing football in the park and
Oh yeah,
baseball in the park.
lots of the fun stuff that the kids don't do much anymore these days.
Kind of funny memory. You remember that park we played baseball at, and we'd remember those dryer vents that were on the side of the building, and we were always trying to hit them with the baseballs.
I sure do.
What's our target? If we hit the building, that was our home run.
For
Wonder we didn't go to jail, man.
sure.
Um, so talk about this. So we one of the things I remember about you, and this again ties in, but you were always athletic. Now your sport of choice, if I remember right, was baseball, right?
Yep, correct.
How long did you play?
I started playing baseball outside of the neighborhood baseball games, obviously, but 8 years old is when I remember I started doing the city league, and I played from or excuse me, 8 years old all the way up till I was about 17. So about
Oh, that's
nine
awesome,
years.
man. And what was your position? Your
Growing up young in my younger years, I was always the pitcher and the shortstop. And then as soon as I hit high school ball, they moved me to second base, and that was kind of my home from there. And then I pitched a little bit in baseball or in high school as well.
I always admired uh, second basemen and shortstops, man. I thought they were probably the most well-rounded players in the game.
Get a lot of action on those spots.
Catchers, yeah, for sure. You kind of had to really understand the coordination of the field, and I always got stuck out in left field because I could catch stuff that came out of the air, but I didn't have the kind of spatial awareness to be a shortstop or second baseman.
Gotcha.
Um, so with the athleticism, I remember in junior high, one of the things that really stood out with you, I remember we were doing physical tests one day in PE, and I've always wanted to ask you this, I keep forgetting to when we're just hanging out, but you could do a crap ton of pull-ups, man. I remember a coach really encouraging you to try to be a pole vaulter because you could do something like, was it like 22 or 28 pull-ups, some ridiculous number?
It was in the 20s for sure. I can't remember exactly what the number was, but the biggest thing was is I was only 100 and I mean junior high when you're talking, I was only 125 pounds soaking wet. And so it was kind of a disadvantage anyway because I didn't have as much weight to work with as everybody else. But then again, my arms were about that big around too. So
That's it was so cool to me because I think the most I ever did was like 8. And so, the difference in that was just remarkable. And I remember thinking, holy crap, dude, this more than meets the eye with Matt. Which it again ties into where I want to go with this. That stood out to me, and then I've told you since, but there was something in high school that really stood out to me regarding you and your story and what you became as an adult. But we had a career day, and you remember me talking to you about this, where there was this conversation you and I were having, and we were both kind of going, well, I don't know kind of what field I really want to go into, and they were wanting us to pick our major in college. And I remember you sitting back and just going, well, I guess I'm just going to be a plumber like my dad. And kind of in almost, you kind of almost sounded defeated, like, oh, I shouldn't, this is just a bummer. I just don't see anything else really standing out. So, excuse me, my eyes are watering a little bit this morning. So with that, you didn't end up being a plumber, but you went into the trade. So tell us how you kind of got started in the business, what business you went into, and what that looks like now.
okay, so yeah, back to working for my dad. I do remember being discouraged about it because unfortunately my dad and I did not get along very well when it come to work, and we butted heads quite a bit. But I can remember as early as 11 years old, my dad would take me out in the field and try to teach me how to be a plumber. And obviously, 11-year-old kid, I had no desire to really learn. I just wanted to, I was there because my dad needed my help, sort of thing. And anyway, fast forward several years, my dad forced me to go into plumbing school when I was a junior in high school. And so I was able to take my first year plumbing school apprenticeship as a junior and then turned around and did it again for the second year as a senior. And then once I graduated, I was able to take the last 2 years consecutively, and I was a journeyman plumber by the time I was 19. And I still didn't get along with my dad. I still didn't really like plumbing that much. And at that time, my brother, my oldest brother that has now passed away, he found a girlfriend of his that lived an hour away. And so he was working for my dad as well. Once he got his girlfriend, they got along pretty good and pretty soon became pregnant. And so my brother had to move an hour away from Pocatello. And so he went and got a job with a plumbing and heating contractor out of Logan, Utah. And he had no idea about heating and air conditioning, but when they couldn't keep him busy on the plumbing side, they'd shift him over to the heating and air conditioning crew, and he started learning how to do that. And so it wasn't too long after that, my brother decided he was done working for somebody else and he went out on his own. And I was 17, just had graduated high school, and my brother decided to hire me. So I moved down to Preston, Idaho, and worked for my brother doing plumbing and heating. And that's where I got introduced in the heating field, which, if you want me to keep going with that,
Yeah, keep going
um,
with that.
I I had a bitter taste in my mouth for the plumbing industry just because it was forced on me. I had to do it. I never had an option. And as soon as the heating and air conditioning became an option for me working for my brother, I absolutely fell in love with it. And I wanted to learn everything and anything I could about it. And it was probably only, I would say probably 3 to 4 months in that I was like, to hell with plumbing. I'm going into the HVAC field. This is my cup of tea. And so then the funny thing was my brother had another employee that did um, tile installations, and he would go do side jobs on the nights and weekends. And he was always looking for an extra hand to mix some mud or carry some boxes of tile in. And I was just a young, tough kid. And I started working with him on the side, learning how to do tile installations. And so fast forward another 4 years after working for my brother, I decided I was going to do this on my own. And I started my own heating and air conditioning business in 2001 and also did ceramic tile installations. And so I named my business Precision Heating and Tile, which is a super weird combination. And everybody always asks me, how in the heck did you mix those two jobs together? So that's the story of how I started my business back then and kind of shifted out of the plumbing industry.
You know, that's really interesting because a lot of times guys talk about once they've gone to the level of journeyman, being locked into a career, right? Because they'll start making a certain amount of money there,
Yep,
and then to switch careers means a drastic pay cut, and so they're kind of feel locked in.
for sure.
Did you feel any of that during that transition?
I definitely did, because obviously my knowledge in the heating and air conditioning field was slim to none compared to the plumbing experience that I had. And obviously the time and effort that I had put into learning the plumbing, it was a discouraging situation to look and think, all right, let's start over. Let's do it again.
And I remember, and I talked to with this about another guy in another episode, but you mentioned not liking plumbing partly because your dad forced you into it.
For sure.
I don't know if how well you knew my dad, but he was a railroader, right? And yeah, when I turned 18, my dad, both my grandfathers, my uncle, half the neighborhood that we lived in were all railroaders. And yeah, they asked me if I wanted to become part of the railroad. And I remember thinking, man, listen to the way you guys talk about the railroad. There's no way. There's no way. So was that part of the equation going into the kind of resentfulness with plumbing?
I I'm not so sure if it was I don't know. I don't know how to explain it other than yeah, it was always forced. It was never an option. And my dad just made me work, which to this day is probably the absolute number one best thing that anybody's ever taught me, hands down, is
Yeah.
get your butt out there and work.
Hey, business owners, I want to talk to you for a second. Do you have a retail space or a pro shop inside your business? If so, I want you to know something. Your customers are buying electrolyte supplements. The problem is they're not buying them from you. Salty Electrolytes can help with that with their wholesale program. They can bring those sales to you in-house so your customers get the electrolytes they deserve from the company they love most. All you have to do is head over to goearnyoursalt.com, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click on the link that says apply for wholesale. Or it's possible that there's a link in the description of this podcast. And now, my friends, go earn your salt.
If you want something, you work for it, period. Nobody else is going to work for it
Yeah.
for you. And so it was always that mentality. And then to kind of go back to why I resented working for my dad, the biggest reason, my dad was born below poverty level when he was younger in Mesa, Arizona. He always told me stories how he had never had running water or electricity in his house until he was 14 years old. And so
Whoa.
he had bare minimum. And so fast forward to when he had his kids, which he had six kids. I was the youngest of those six. He provided a roof over our head, food on our table, and anything else we wanted was 100% up to us. And we resented that our whole lives because all of our friends in the neighborhood seemed to have it pretty good. And, they had all the amenities. They had the Nintendos and the Segas and all the fun things that kids had back then, trampolines, whatnot. And my dad was straightforward, bare minimum. And if you want anything else, go work for it. So back to what I was getting at, when I stepped away from my dad, started working for my brother was absolutely phenomenal about rewarding me for the work that I did. And growing up, I never was rewarded other than a roof over my head and food on the table, which granted was enough and plenty. But as a young kid, wanting extra, doing extra, and not getting the reward, it was brutal. And so when my brother taught me that, hey, the more you work, the more money you make, the harder you work, the more you learn, more money you make. And as soon as I got that concept in my head, that's when my entrepreneurship kicked in and it was like, yeah, there's a lot of money to be made in this situation. I'm going to go for it.
Yeah, so that thing that you resented really turned into a blessing, didn't it?
100%
Yeah.
for me and my
I
siblings.
yeah. It sounds like it, man. And I think of that meme that's been going around, it talks about how tough people were because they held the wrench for their dad or they held the flashlight for their dad, and they're
Yeah.
it's, I imagine in plumbing there's plenty of those
Oh,
holding the
for sure.
flashlight moments. So
Yeah. A lot of yelling
yeah,
and screaming when I didn't do exactly what I was supposed to when I was supposed to do it.
you didn't point that light at the exact right thing.
That's right.
It's funny because I did the same thing, right? I would work on cars with my dad, and I remember that freaking flashlight, man. It's a burnt in memory in my head, and I'm trying to hold it on the right spot, or I'm trying to find the right wrench to hand him, and it stressed me out. But as you know, I own another business outside of my supplement company that works on the automobiles, right? We do maintenance service, but I'm with you on that, man. It's the same those times when I was so ticked off that my dad was being such a jerk and screaming at me because I wasn't pointing the light in the right direction. I was also learning, right? And I learned how to work on cars because of those situations. And even though they were hard and they were frustrating, they made me mad at the time. It turned into a nice career choice for me. So with that, how did your how's your relationship with your dad now?
It's a little rocky to be honest with you. My dad and I have a lot of different personality traits, and obviously we're both stubborn and hard-willed, and so we've never really had anything to connect on. Like a lot of my buddies that I've grown up with, their dad has taken them out camping or fishing or hunting or hiking or bike riding or something. Somebody always has a hobby that their dad either taught them or took them out to do for a reward situation if they did their chores or whatever. My dad was just straight, let's take care of six kids. Let's work our butt off. Let's pay our bills. Let's make sure that there's food on the table, roof over our head. And that was the end of my dad's relationship with us kids was just to the grind. And so
Yeah.
that resentment's just kind of stayed with me and I feel like my dad is kind of a I guess you'd say quote unquote greedy person sometimes and I'm not. I've prided myself my whole life to not be a greedy person and try to give the shirt off my back when it's needed. And because my dad wasn't that way, I still love him. I still play golf with him, still hang out with him
Oh,
when I
cool.
can. So I make the relationship there because I don't ever want to live with regrets.
Yeah. Does I didn't know you guys were playing golf together because golf is a kind of a recent thing in your life, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I started taking up golf seriously about 2 years ago.
Yeah. Um, dude, that's awesome. Cause yeah, I played for a little while, but my dad was never in the physical condition to play. So, I never got to experience that with him. That'd be pretty rad.
Yeah, that's been one of the only things my dad and I have ever been able to do outside of work and actually spend time together.
Yeah.
So it's been good.
No, that's valuable, man. Yeah. Take advantage of that.
Oh yeah, for
That's
sure.
not going to be there forever, but, um, so in business, you went into heating and air, transitioned out of plumbing into heating, cooling, tile. It's been just like a straight up go from there, hasn't it? No
It,
hard spots.
it has. I found out real quickly that I had about 20% of the training that I needed to jump out on my own as a business owner, which was an absolute giant slap in the face because I was a young kid thinking, oh, I know how to do this. I can take care of this, no problem. I jumped in with both hands and feet into the business world and realized real fast that I was about 80% short of the knowledge and the training and the experience that I needed to do what I needed to do.
So, dude, I see that all the time, and especially in the trades, right? Somebody gets good at the trade part of it,
Hmm.
but doesn't realize when they go out on their own that there's a whole different art form there that's the business part of it. How was that transition for you?
It was tough. I'm not gonna lie. Back to school when we were younger, I didn't really care about school that much until high school when they told me, hey, you can't play baseball unless you get your grades up a little bit. And then until that moment, I honestly did not care about school that much because I struggled a little bit in my academic career from start to finish and it was a lot of different reasons. But for the most part, when it come to the business side of running the business, thank goodness I knew the simple math and simple this and that. But when it comes to the percentages and the profit margins and the profit and losses and making sure you're comparing all this stuff to make sure your business is not just rolling money through there, it's actually making money and being able to retain it. And it was a it was an ass kicker, let's just put it that way.
Well, okay, so you said you started into that field in around 2001,
Yep. As
right?
as a
We graduated
self-employed.
high, okay, on your own.
Yep.
So 2001, come, 6, 7 years later, we go through a pretty big recession. Tell me your story about that because that part, when I talked to you just personally, we both went through a real similar dip. Okay,
Yeah.
I ended up in Chapter 11 bankruptcy and lost everything I owned. Had to start over from scratch at 32 years old. You pulled it off, but it wasn't easy for you. Tell us that story.
Yeah, so when I went into business, like I said, I struggled. Um, but I was thrown into it, both hands and feet, and I had absolutely no choice but to figure it out. And so through trial and error and through a lot of asking questions from other professionals and figuring some stuff out, long story short, it took me approximately 5 to 6 years to make the business really start making a profit instead of me just making a wage through the business. And so right about that time was around 2006, 2007, and construction was just absolutely going nuts back then. And
Mm-hmm.
that it was that point where I finally started really figuring out how to make money. And my grandfather built a cabin in Island Park back in '76, and in 2007, I was able to invest in that cabin with my brother and my cousin, and so I acquired a pretty darn nice asset up in Island Park, Idaho. And then I also had just built a house in 2007, my very first new construction house that I built for myself, and I thought I had the world by the cojones, man. I thought it was just sweet sailing from there. But shortly after that, like you said, man, the recession hit around '08, and a lot of the contractors during that time did have to take out bankruptcy because they were struggling. And unfortunately, as a subcontractor, I got stuck holding the bag for a lot of people's debt that they owed me. So at that time, I took a total of about $84,000 in bankruptcy debts. And out of that 84,000, 48,000 of it was materials that I owed to creditors. And that's when the tough times hit, man. I hit a low point to where I was like, there's absolutely no way I'm going to recover from this. And so I ended up having to sell my house and ended up going back to bare bones and just pinching pennies as tight as I could. And there was a lot of times in there where I thought to myself, well, bankruptcy is the only option. And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Chubbuck and Pocatello, Idaho is such a small community that if I were to go bankrupt and not pay my debt to these people that I have to look at in the grocery stores, passing them through on the streets and seeing them at ball games, whatever it is, I want to be able to look them in the face and shake their hand and realize that I didn't hold the bag for anybody, you know.
Yeah.
So it was a very tough time. I went from hero to zero. I went from zero to hero and then back from hero to zero real fast.
Man, but you kind of were like that airplane that just misses the ground, right? You
100%.
you pulled up um, some of the decisions you had made prior to that started to bear some good fruit. They gave you enough asset base where you're able to survive that dip.
Yep.
Um, Digging out of that, what did that look like for you? Because you probably learned some tough lessons. Like you mentioned going back to bare bones from a just a business philosophy standpoint. What did you take away from that experience?
Honestly, just a really strong appreciation for the good times, you know. A lot of us take for granted the good times and we forget about the bad. And still to this day, I mean, that's a part of my life that I'll never forget. And because it humbled me, you know, it put me from the top back down to the bottom and made me realize that I had to work for whatever everything I had again and just dig myself out of a hole. And mentally and physically, that was probably the toughest thing I've ever done. But at the same time, it was rewarding because back to my dad's childhood, you know, you want more, you want extra, do it yourself. And
Yeah.
so there was
No,
nobody else.
it sounds to me like your dad's growing up experience. He didn't have enough to where luxuries were important to him. It was survival, right?
100%.
And you got to experience some of that going through that business hardship where, things start to turn down. You start realizing that, you know what, I need to live like I'm in the rough times so that I can profit during the boom times, right?
100%. And now that you say that,
Yeah.
that brings to mind, you know, the fact that I was able to go through that hardship and you asked me what lessons I pulled back from it, you know, I held on to that for a long time thinking that it was going to happen again. And so because of that fear that it was going to happen again, I did nothing but pinch pennies. And you always hear people say, you know, you need to live within your means. Well, my means were here and I lived down here for a long time because I thought I had to. And because of that, you know, I lived a very modest lifestyle for probably a good 10 years after that experience. And because of that, I was able to invest a lot of money into different things and really stockpile a insurance cushion, if you will, on the finance side of
Yeah.
things, so that if or when that happened, I was prepared for it.
Yeah, man, that's an interesting thing because I think you and I have had that discussion on a personal level a lot of times about how life looks with the scar tissue we carry around, right?
Hmm.
And and yeah, I think back as you talked about your dad, he had scar tissue that he brought, and he still kind of tried to live down here, even though life probably was not there still. I mean, he had lot more margin in his world than he recognized, I think.
For sure.
And so with you and I both, yeah, after going through the times we did, I love how you put that. You were afraid it would happen again because the reality is it could happen again, right?
Yep.
So you've put some cushion between you and life now, right? And this is from an asset base and just a financial base. And tell talk about some of the other things that you've become involved in now.
Okay. So again, back to my dad, you know, my dad was really into real estate. I'm not sure exactly who got him into the real estate business because it wasn't his dad. I think it was just some peers and coworkers around that he worked with throughout the years, but he learned how to invest into real estate. And it's at a young age, I can always remember listening to my dad talk to his buddies or talk to his friends or talk to my mom or once in a while talk to us kids about investing in real estate. And so that again, I took from my dad. I watched my dad have apartment buildings and some houses that he rented, and I was like, you know what, I can see that that's making him some money to support 6 kids, plus his heating and air conditioning business. And so I started dabbling in real estate really early age at 19. And then it didn't take me long to realize that once you start investing into real estate and building new construction projects, it was a giant write-off for my heating and air conditioning business because I was able to work out a lot of trade work and a lot of different angles that saved me a ton of money. And then I was able to save a lot of money on taxes. And so then I learned that the more I build, the more I keep purchasing the real estate, the more tax deductions and tax breaks that I'm getting through my business. And so I honestly unintentionally started building a pretty big portfolio with real estate, and it was mainly driven to where can I save tax dollars on my heating and air conditioning business. And it after a while, it just got to the point where I could see the writing on the wall that I was making more money in the real estate dealings than I was in the heating and air conditioning business half the time. But thank goodness it was because of the cash flow that I had coming through my heating and air conditioning company that allowed me to invest in the real estate and allowed me to have that working capital, and it just snowballed from there. And so really I've turned into a developer slash investor more than I was the heating and air.
Being able to complete the climb to mastery requires the proper nutrition. This is why it's important to take in a potent blend of electrolytes that is in tune with your output and brings strength to your goals. This potent blend is only found in salt electrolytes. Salt targets your depleted electrolyte levels with a boost of hydration and health. It gives your body the baseline recovery it needs.
Once that got to the point where it is now, where it's bringing in a pretty good residual income, I was actually realized that with my heating and air conditioning business, I wasn't passionate about it anymore. And it became a job. And that job was a job that
Oh,
I absolutely despised getting up in the morning and going into work. It was for my employees and it was for my customers, and I was putting myself at the bottom of the totem pole. And so 2.5 years ago, I had an employee that had been with me for 20 years. His name is Paul Hall. He was with me through the thick and thin of the business and knew everything, knew all the customers, knew the employees, and knew the business in and out. And I was able to talk him into taking over the business about 2.5 years ago and allowing me to semi-retire so that I could continue working with the real estate and then golfing every day.
golfing and fishing, huh?
That's right.
Um, so something kind of occurred to me there. So you've made this deal with Paul where are you carrying the contract? Is that how that's working with the transfer of the business?
Honestly, and this is probably one of my favorite stories to tell people, is I actually put the business up for sale and I didn't let anybody know about it because I didn't want the community to know that I was selling, and I definitely didn't want my employees to know I was selling. But after approaching Paul and giving him the opportunity to buy the business at a ridiculously low rate, he was like everybody else. They were scared. He was scared to jump in with both hands and feet, and he didn't know what he was getting into. So he turned it down. So I had the business up for sale for an entire year. And that particular
Mm,
year that I put it up for sale is when COVID pandemic hit us. And every investor in this world just puckered up as tight as they could because nobody knew what was going to happen with the investments all over the board.
sure.
And so after the year of having it up for sale, I got out of the sales contract and I approached Paul one more time and I said, look, dude, this is where I'm at. I either need to quit, which is going to cause you to lose your job, all your coworkers will lose their jobs, and all of our customers not to have a heating and air conditioning company to rely on. I said, I don't want to do that. And he looked at me and he goes, well, what am I supposed to do about it? And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I asked you to purchase this business a year ago and you turned me down. What if I give you the business? And he just gave me that kind of a deer in the headlight look, like, what is this guy talking about? And so I wanted an out so bad, but at the same time, I was so conscious about hurting the employees and the customers that I needed somebody to carry on the business or it was going to collapse and it wasn't going to be pretty. And so Paul
Yeah.
actually um, took a job offer out at the INL site. For those of you who don't know that, it's International Laboratories out here. And he was offered a job out there and he come to me and told me that he was going to take it. And it just
Mm.
absolutely crushed my hopes and dreams. And I told him, I said, I want you to do what's best for you. I want to see you succeed. And if that's the decision you need to make to make your life better, I'll shake your hand and tell you congratulations and walk you out the door. And at that point, I thought, well, I guess I'm gonna have to go back to the drawing board and figure out something else. And 2 days went by, and Paul cornered me in the office one morning. He came into work about 20 minutes earlier than usual. He says, hey, I need to talk to you. I said, what's up? He goes, well, it's about work. And I said, oh, how much more time do you need? And how much more time can you give me? He goes, no, that's what I want to talk to you about. I decided to turn the job down at the site, and I want to take you up on your offer. And that was a glorious day.
Oh man. Yeah, that's pretty. I don't know. Part of me kind of gets a little choked up on that story because I've felt that pain before. You know, a lot of times people they don't realize the gut check that happens when someone you've worked with for that long comes and tells you they're done. You know, it's if you've never been an employer, that crap hurts, man. It
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 does.
cuts deep. And so yeah, I can imagine the the thrill you got when he come back to you.
For sure. It's like losing a family member at that point. You spend more time at work than you do at home with your family and your coworkers when you're working at that close proximity, they become your family. It's not just a coworker anymore. And
Yeah, man, he's
it was a gut-wrenching thought that he's not going to be around anymore.
yeah. Yeah, I get irritated anytime I hear somebody say, "Yeah, you know, this guy loves to fire people." I'm like, "No, I've never met a good business owner that loves to fire people, man, or loves to part ways with anybody. Loves to see an employee quit. It's always gut wrench."
For
But,
sure.
so you mentioned giving the business to Paul, but you still have some involvement there. What does that look like day to day?
Um, you know, I wanted him to take the business over, but at the same time, I wanted to make sure he wasn't going to fall on his face because, when I started my business, I was down at a level that was manageable. And again, I told you I was overwhelmed because I didn't know what I was doing. Well, Paul started a
Yeah.
business. He was taking over a business that had been in operation for 28 years and thriving. And we had,
So what you're saying is when you started, it was just you,
it was
and you built it into this much bigger thing.
exactly.
That now he's entering the game when it's already an established hopping company.
Yeah. And when you say a company is established, anybody that's been in employment, um, self-employment or even a CEO or in management position knows that when you have success, the more success you have, the more stress and the more headaches and the more problems that you run into. And so Paul didn't quite know what he was getting into. And when he jumped into it, reality slapped him in the face real hard. But I'm telling you right now, that dude put his head down, put his nose to the grind, and he has surpassed every expectation I could ever thought. But back to the reason I have involvement in it is I really wanted to stick around to make sure he was going to succeed. And so I promised him I would stick around for 4 years. I'd come into his office in the mornings, Monday through Thursday, however long it takes. And at first, when I said that, I thought it was going to be 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours a day to get this part of the business operable. And I came to realize real quick that it was only going to take me between a half an hour and an hour a day, 4 days a week, to do all of his billing, his permits, his estimates, and then make sure that his financial side was staying up where it needed to be. And then also I was kind of keeping an eye of how he was treating the employees and how he was treating the customers and making sure everything was going. So I still go in the office as an hourly employee to Paul and work for a wage and just make sure that his business is running smoothly like it should, which it is.
Nice. Um, this brings up another question just that I have. You kind of divulge whatever you feel comfortable. But as you're, I get this question a lot when I'm interacting with business people, especially if they're trying to make a transition like you guys are. But I'll see owners or managers get so reliant on a certain employee that if that employee ever quit, they'd be hurting because they don't know how to do the function that they've hired that person to do. How are you and Paul arranging that so that as you phase out a couple of years from now, um, he'll know exactly what you're doing with the billing and the invoicing and that stuff?
Yeah. So at first, when we started, I was doing as much as I could. Slowly, Paul decided to start taking over the permitting process on his own. And so he took that on. And then shortly after that, he decided to start taking his inspection call-ins on his own. And mainly it was because I was the third guy or the middleman, I guess you'd say, where he would give me information and then I'd have to do it. And it got to the point where he realized real quick that, hey, it's just as quick and easy for me to do this as it is to get Matt involved. And so he's already slowly started taking on um, ordering the parts, checking his parts list to make sure that the pricing's correct. He does all of his permitting. And so the only thing I'm down to doing right now is the billing. And we have a full-time, or not full-time, but a part-time office staff that comes in. It's actually a CPA that's been doing our books for several years. They come in the office and do the payroll, the taxes, and all the accounts receivable. And so really the only thing he needs to phase me out of now is the billing cycle. And like I said, it's a half to an hour, 4 days a week. So 4.5 to 5 hours a week is all I'm taking off of his plate at the moment. So he should be able
Nice.
to
Okay,
phase
so you
into,
guys are pretty strategic in that transfer so that by the
yeah,
time you step aside, there won't be any questions he has left.
for sure.
Nice. I see that commonly during transitions like that where, the previous owner maybe just steps out too soon and leaves a lot of gap for that other person to try to make up. And you'll see the business go through a bump, like a big speed bump it causes because they just don't know what to do and they didn't adequately prepare the new owner or the employee that's taking over. I've got a similar situation going on in my other business where I'm going to phase myself out over the next 3 years, 3.5 years. And yeah, that's a job, right? Is being very conscious of making sure these guys have all the tools that they need to succeed. Because in my situation, I'm not giving that business away. I'm selling it to them. And so I want that investment to retain its value or grow. So this is important stuff, right? We see business owners screw this up on a pretty regular basis. I'm fascinated a bit too because you mentioned that kind of burnout feel you were feeling. You were ready to be done almost at all costs, like you were done.
Yeah.
Do you see? Just tell me your thoughts on this. But your business really, it's a valuable asset, and I think sometimes guys forget that, and they start feeling that burnout. How to phrase this? Sometimes they just start to pull back and they let the business dissolve, and it kind of just attrition over time takes that thing out. Um, you were able to go through that kind of burnout stage without that really happening. It sounds like is that accurate?
It's accurate, but I'm telling you right now, I was on the edge of the cliff. It was everything in my power to not jump off that cliff at any moment. So it
Yeah.
was close to hitting rock bottom and me just dissolving the business.
Well, that's part of the fascination I have because that was the impression I got again talking to you outside of this podcast was you've kind of that's been your MO for most of your life is you just when push comes to shove you just grind and you may not love what's going on, but you still push. This is called the Go Earn Your Salt podcast, right? And the idea of earning your salt, what comes to your mind when you hear that phrase?
The only thing I can think of that comes to my mind is just don't give up. People give up too easy anymore. And 90% of the time it's because it gets tough. And those people that are outstanding above the rest of the crowd in any application, whether it's work or sports or anything like that, are the people that are not so easy to give up when the tough gets tough, the tough get going, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, how many times have we heard that phrase and
A
never really
lot,
put it into, yeah, you realize what that means, man.
100%.
Um, it's almost romanticized, but man, when you get down in the trenches and you're just grinding through life, you're discouraged, things are tight, life sucks. You're kind of in that fog of war per se. And yeah, man, you've done a great job just grinding through that. So,
Yeah, it
um,
was worth it for sure.
so turn the corner just a little bit here. What would you say has been your most valuable learning experience?
I would probably have to bring my kid into this. I got a 12-year-old daughter, and I was always a responsible adult. I was running the business already at a young age and had no choice but to be responsible. But when my child came into my life, it was like, holy crap, there's a lot of different levels of responsibility that I need to step it up on. And she really
Yeah,
put
for
me,
real.
she put me in that mindset that I have more than just myself to put down to the grind for. And so I would honestly say that the birth of my child was the number one best learning experience of my life.
Man. If you had to go back and do your adult life all over again, what would you change? Or would you? Would you?
Oh, that's a tough one because looking at the outcome that I've got going on in my life right now, I'd have to say I wouldn't change a damn thing, but you know, there's probably a lot of things I could have changed for the good and the bad, but as a whole, man, I really don't know that there's anything I would have changed much.
So that's important that you say that because you've in this conversation you've mentioned some pretty difficult things you've gone through. But yet looking back, you mentioned that, with your dad forcing you into the plumbing trade and how you've grown to value that. And then the grind of business and learning how it works and how to make it profitable and all that. Um, Going through the recession period and almost losing everything, and then you're saying those hard things ended up being some of the most valuable experiences you could have had. Am I
100%.
hearing you right?
100%. If you don't have
Yeah.
tough times, you're never going to understand to enjoy the good times.
Shoot, man. I yeah. I want the audience to hear that because I think that's a common thread that I've learned from especially business owners, but just people in general who have succeeded in any venture. The tough times are what makes them what they are. And so when you're going through the slog and you're struggling through life, look on those times fondly because that's where you're going to learn some lessons that will pay off later.
I agree, for sure.
Man.
And honestly, we
Um,
won't have lessons to learn if we don't have a reason to. If it was so easy and so peachy keen all the time, we would never have to push and learn anything else because it's already there. But that's what
yeah.
life is awesome about is right when you think that life is awesome, something comes and smacks you upside the head and gives you a reality check like, no, you still got struggles to deal with, bud.
Yeah. Well, you've had a couple things here recently that have smacked you upside the head. Are you comfortable talking about that?
Yeah, you bet.
Okay.
Yeah, like Riley said, I I go through this bliss time in my life where I was actually able to semi-retire, hand the business over to Paul, and get into my routine of being to the grind 24/7 to having a lot of time for myself. And so basically life got real good. You know, I started golfing every day. Yeah, I started going fishing. Me and Riley reconnected and we went fishing several times, had some great times. And so life just made a turn for the best. And I had nothing but everything to be grateful for. And then right about that time, I was golfing with some buddies of mine, and I realized that I was starting to have a little bit of a struggle to see the golf ball when it was landing on the green. And I didn't think nothing of it. And a couple more weeks went by, and all of a sudden I realized I can't even see the ball hit the green anymore. And then fast forward another year, and the golf ball would go out about 150 yards, and then I just couldn't see it anymore. And so I started speaking my concerns to some friends and family and whatnot. They're like, well, hell, man, you're in your 40s. You need to go get your eyes checked. You probably just need glasses. And that was a low blow to my self-confidence. And I was like, whatever, I guess I'll go see if I need glasses. And so I went to see an eye doctor. And he says, yeah, you definitely got some problems going on with your eyes, but we can't seem to get them fixed with regular prescription glasses. I'm going to need you to go to this uh, specialist over in Idaho Falls. And so he sent me to a specialist. The specialist seen me. They couldn't find anything wrong. They said my eyes looked healthy, but again, they couldn't get the prescription glasses to fix my vision like they normally can. Went to two more specialists locally, same story, getting frustrated, and they finally sent me to Moran Eye Center in U of U, Utah. And I was in a doctor's appointment from 8 o'clock in the morning till 5:15 at night without any breaks.
Mm.
They were doing every test that you could possibly think of to try to figure out what was going on with my eyes. Anyway, the lady
Which
comes
usually
in.
that starts to scare you after you've been in there a while, huh?
I was terrified. Like I thought for sure it was something super bad. And in my mind, the only thing I could keep thinking of was a tumor. Kept thinking I had a tumor in my head that was putting pressure on my eyes and causing some problems. That was the worst case scenario that I had. But come to find out after all the tests, the doctor came back and said, you know, we think you have a genetic retinal disease. We need to see if you're willing to join this trial of genetic testing that's somebody's got a grant for it, so it's not going to cost you any money, but we need to poke and prod you a little bit and take a DNA sample and put you in the database and see if it is a genetic um, defect in your retina. So I agreed
Mm.
to it, and about 6 months went by, and the results finally came back, and that it was not a genetic defect like they thought it was, but it was still a retinal disease of some sort. And so that's kind of the hard part of the whole situation, not only losing my vision at the moment, but no answers because they didn't exactly have a name for the condition other than it's a retinal disease of some sort. There's no cure, there's no glasses that are going to fix it, and there's just absolutely nothing we can do. And they literally sent me on my way. So I wanted a second opinion, and I got another second opinion and got the same results. So long story short, I found out that I had a retinal disease in both eyes. It's affecting my central vision, and I had really good vision my whole life. And so again, back to taking things for granted, you know, until it's not there or you have to go through the hard times, you don't realize how important things are. So kind of a low blow having some major vision problems over the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, man. I hadn't heard that second part that you had that they determined it wasn't genetic because I think last time you and I talked about it in any depth, they were thinking it was genetic at that time. So is that a positive thing that it's not a genetic thing, or is it just kind of put it in limbo till now you don't really know what's going on?
It kind of just puts it in limbo, but the only thing about it not being a genetic testing is they seem to be doing a lot more studies on the genetic side of retinal diseases because it's kind of a more broad spectrum of retinal disease. And so I guess the downside is whatever it is I'm dealing with, they're not doing quite as much research as they are on the genetic side of things.
Mm. So that's probably again a little discouraging, and the kind of wish there was more going on
Yeah,
there.
for sure.
Yeah, man, that's a bummer. So where are you at in that now? You kind of mentioned to me last time we were fishing that you were plateaued a bit, that things haven't been degrading as fast as they were.
Yeah, and I think that's true. One of the things that the doctor told me is that I asked her, I said, how much longer do I have vision for? Like, how is this going to play out? And she told me that every person's different. Everybody handles things different, and everybody's body's different. So she told me you could either continue on the path that you're on, it could stop, it could slow down, it could plateau, it could get worse. She says everybody's different, so I cannot give you an answer. And so the first year, I felt like it went down at a pretty drastic pace to where I was really scared to death that I was going to lose my vision completely. And fast forward another year and a half, so 2.5 total years after realized I had the issue, I do feel like it's plateaued quite a bit or at least slowed down a ton so that it's not progressing as fast as it was.
That's sort of good news, man. I'm yeah bummed out to hear that's something you're struggling with. Switch gears a little bit. You had another recent event that really gut checked you. Also, again, if you're not comfortable talking about that,
Yeah, no,
that's
I'm
okay.
good.
But
Yeah, the other gut check that I had, um, one of the things I did that kind of backtrack and give a backstory here is my fiance and I decided that we were going to buy a camp trailer and go on a trip across the United States for the winter time. And mainly it was because of my eyes. I told my fiance that I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to see. And so I want to go see as much as I can right now. So we took full
mhm.
advantage of that and went all the way down to Naples, Florida and back. And that was a great trip. But right at the last tail end of our trip, we were back in Arizona and we were probably thinking we were going to stay about 3 more weeks. And all of a sudden, we were in Yuma, Arizona, and got a phone call from one of my nephews. He was on the phone with his wife, and they were both sobbing so bad I couldn't even understand what they were saying. And finally got it out of them that my nephew was calling to inform that my oldest brother, Mike, had passed away. And so obviously, I had 5 other siblings. There were 6 kids in the family, and I was the youngest. That particular brother that passed away was the same brother we talked about earlier that I worked for. And so
Mm.
he taught me the ins and outs of pretty much everything I needed to know to get out on my own. And so that was a tragic loss for sure. And then to go into more depth, probably more information than anybody needs, but the part about that death that really made it hard was my brother was dealing with a step kid in his house that was mentally challenged. And he wasn't always mentally challenged. He was a good kid. And until his mid-20s, he started having really bad mental issues. And he was living in my brother's house with his wife. And the way that my brother lost his life was after several months of dealing with this. My nephew went into his room and actually stabbed my brother to death. So we didn't only lose my brother, we lost our nephew as well. And then had to face the fact that our nephew took my brother's life. So yeah, that was a huge blow.
Yeah, man. Gosh, this breaks my heart. I and that was at the time of this recording. What are we 3 months away from that?
Yep,
Something like that. Yeah, yeah. So pretty recent, still pretty fresh.
for sure.
Um, yeah, man. Um, I want to turn the corner. I know that's some pretty difficult stuff. You've got this. I want to switch gears to kind of some lighter stuff. We're. Um, I want to know what from here. Where do you go? What are you going to do next?
Um, you know, I'm kind of still in that mode that I told you I was in about living down here at my means because I'm scared that it's going to happen again. Even though I'm not in the
Yeah.
business any longer and I don't really have anything to lose in the business side of things, I invested into a big apartment complex about 6 years ago. I developed a piece of land in Chubbuck, Idaho, and we put 11 fourplexes on there. So we got 44 apartment units. And
Shoot.
obviously, I wasn't wealthy enough to fund that project without getting a substantial loan. And so I ended up taking out I think it ended up being a total of about $3.4 million loan to do that project. And I know from the experiences that I've had, unfortunately, that there's going to be tough times come along again. And so right now, I'm really focused on just getting those mortgages paid down as fast as I possibly can and snowball those down to where if the storm comes, then I'm going to be able to weather it again. And so I'm really close to that point. I put myself on a strict payoff situation and I'm approximately 4 years off from that. And I think that I'm probably going to end up just keep investing into the real estate market. I'll probably get a loan on one of the apartment buildings that I have once it is paid off, and I have a big cushion there. And then I'll probably
Mhm.
either build something else or buy something else and just start increasing the amount of properties that I have in the real estate portfolio that I'm dealing with.
Shoot, man. Yeah. I hadn't done the math. I remember we talked a couple of years ago about how many buildings you had there, but I didn't realize there was 11 of them.
Yeah,
And
it's a
then you
big
have some,
project.
you have some rental houses too, don't you?
I do. Yep. I have four other homes that are single family dwelling homes. And then we also have a cabin in Island Park that I had mentioned that my cousin and my brother and I purchased from my grandpa. So real estate's definitely been a
Yeah.
big influence in my life for sure.
Well, that's just it, man. I talked about earlier, we grow up together and nobody knows when you're kids and you're all hanging out what other people are going to do. And you were always that kind of, you weren't a real boisterous person, you just got along with everybody and you were steady, always steady. And it seemed like that has translated to your adulthood, right? Where you never did things with a lot of fanfare. It was just steady, 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 and you've grown yourself into quite the entrepreneur, dude. It's an impressive story.
Well, I appreciate it. And again, like I told you, a lot of this stuff that's happened in my life, I feel like is kind of an accident because a lot of it was done in unintentional that just turned out to be a good situation. So it was a little bit of a lot of hard work and determination and sacrifice, but a lot of the choices I made were quote unquote accidental, which was I mean, I don't want to take it off of my choices and my hard work, but I do think that a lot of it was luck and timing.
It's funny you say that because there's this you've heard the term imposter syndrome,
Hmm.
right? There's some things I put together over the years as I've talked to business owners and entrepreneurs and just successful people in general, but there's hardly ever a path to run on. You're making it up as you go. But only you know that, and the people around you, they see you growing and doing certain things and building a business and uh, the success that eventually comes with that. They don't see the heartache and the heartbreak that goes into that, all the work and the grind. So yeah, the way you're saying that, like you accidentally did it. There was really no accident there. Maybe the direction didn't. It wasn't according to what you originally thought or your original plan for life, but yeah, there was a lot of purpose and that went into that. But it feels because you see all the things that you had to just kind of make it up as you went. It can feel kind of accidental.
Yeah, for sure.
Where someone outside, like I look at your situation from the outside and I go, yeah, I see the purpose in it. I see how dedicated you had to be and how you had to just build, build, build and do the things that you knew how to do and learned how to do. Um, but yeah, man, I think every entrepreneur I've ever talked to, every business owner I've ever talked to feels like they're just making it up and they sort of kind of happen to get there, but no, you've killed it, man.
I
Um,
appreciate it.
Hey, I've got a couple questions for you that are just on the lighter side of things, just some fun ones. Um, you game to answer a few of those?
Yeah, you betcha.
All right, man. This is just something that's been bugging me recently, but um, if you eat a cheeseburger, dude, you ever get one of those where they make it upside down, they put the veggies on the bottom? Are you a veggies up or veggies down kind of guy?
It's funny you ask that because I've had obsessive compulsive disorder my whole life, and it's with stuff like that yeah, it drives me nuts.
So
I like
veggies
the
up or
veggies
veggies
on the
down?
top. Veggies should be on the
Yeah,
top.
for sure. I'm with you, man. I'm taking points on that. Um, have you ever been in a fight?
It's been a long time, but yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How old were you when that happened?
I was only in junior high the last time I got in a fight.
Yeah, did you win or lose?
You know, it wasn't a win or lose situation sort of thing. It was more of a I heart checked a guy from we were playing basketball and he was being completely aggressive. And like I told you, in junior high, I was 125 pounds soaking wet. This kid
Yeah.
was 6'2", 190, built like a brick shit house, and he was just roughing me around, man. And I got to the point where I was just done taking it. And I just turned around and I heart checked him and pushed him on the ground, and everybody thought he was going to jump up and just pummel me. And then it just turned out to be
Probably
a
you too,
pushing
huh?
match for a second.
Oh, so it didn't end up with
It didn't
actual
ended up
blows
with
thrown,
any
huh?
fist flying. No, it did not.
You were pretty grateful about that, I
Yeah,
bet
I
you.
was. I thought for sure I was going to get my butt handed to me real quick, and I would have.
Um,
But
have you were you ever kicked out of school?
I can't say I remember a time where I was ever kicked out of school. No,
All right.
I was kicked off
Um,
the
s-
bus.
yeah?
Yep, I
Tell us
got
about
kicked off
that.
the bus. Back to the story we talked about earlier. Baseball was a passion of mine. We were sitting at the bus stop in Chubbuck, Idaho, and we had a fresh plowed potato field that we were sitting there waiting for the bus to show up. And I had this stupid bright idea that we were all going to pick up little baby potato seedlings. And on the count of three, while we're driving down the road, we were all going to just throw the potato at the bus driver. And then that way, none of us would get in
Oh
trouble because he
crap.
couldn't figure out who did it.
Because we
Well,
all did it, huh?
we all grabbed potatoes and it was time. And one, two, three was hauled out, and everybody's hand came up. And I was the only one in the entire bus that let go of the potato.
Oh, dude.
And
You got everyone else chickened out,
it hit the bus driver right in the back of the head, and he was not
huh?
happy. So he hit the
Was
brakes.
that Mr. Jolly?
I don't
Mr.
remember
Jolly?
which bus driver it was. I do not remember his name, but he was livid. And so he went
Because,
to the principal and I got kicked off the bus.
oh, dude. You know, do you remember that guy, Mr. Jolly?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, because I think we both met at that same bus stop, right? Because you came down to Cole and Chubbuck Road,
Yep.
right there at the Catholic church that was there.
Yep.
Um, so funny because I got kicked off that same bus and had to go to the principal, and then I had to go down to the actual whatever the school district where they kept the buses, and they made me do classes because such a toad on the bus. So I remember all that stuff too. But yeah, but at the end of the school year, Mr. Jolly pulls me up to the front of the bus. Man, I thought, oh crap, what's going on? And he gave me some candy bars, and he told me that was the most improved kid on the bus for the year. So
I don't know if
that
that's a
was
good
pretty
thing or a
good fun.
bad thing.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Bus driver giving me candy. It was weird, but I enjoyed it.
That's
It
funny.
was, um, oh, dude, I didn't know the potato story though. That's fantastic. Okay, so bucket list challenge, man. What's something on your bucket list you want to get done in the near future?
Um, you know, I think the bucket list that I've got right now at this moment, I've traveled all over the United States and several countries. I love to travel, but one of the most beautiful destinations in the world that I've heard about for years is right in the corner of our backyard, and that's Glacier National Park. I have
Hmm.
yet to spend any time in Glacier National Park, and so I think that I'm gonna schedule a trip to go up through there and spend some time and actually see it.
Oh, that'd be awesome, man. Yeah, I've never been there either. And a buddy of mine goes up there on a pretty regular basis, and he's got yeah, some of the pictures I see just amazing.
Yeah, and like I
Um,
said, it's right in our backyard.
yeah, it's wild. So many places right around here that I've never visited. Yeah. So tell me this. Do you have a book recommendation?
You know, we talked about this early in the conversation that I never was a fan of schoolwork, and I never dove into schoolwork. And one of the things about school that I absolutely despise and that caused me not to like school was I have a really hard time comprehending when I read. And maybe that's a learning disability that I've dealt with my whole life, or maybe it's just I don't like it. But nonetheless, I do not read much, and so I wish I had a recommendation for a book, but I don't because I just unfortunately
Do,
don't read
do you do
much.
the audiobook at all?
I've done a couple of audiobooks, but I have a short attention span. I probably have ADHD a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised, but half the time I
Well,
don't finish them.
I want that to be an encouragement, man, because a lot of times people they act like that lack of ability to just sit in a classroom setting and sit and read is a disability. I'm not sure it is, man. I think sometimes it's a it's just a different bent. I think it's a different it can almost be a superpower in some ways, and so I do kind of like to hear you say that because you're not the only one, especially when I see business owners or athletes or that sort of thing, that man, the sit down kind of classroom work is difficult for them.
Yeah,
And but they can just be so good at so many other things uh, that the school system doesn't necessarily lend itself to, right? But yeah, it has nothing to do with a person's overall intelligence. It just has to do with that single activity that's
gotcha.
difficult. So
It's funny you bring
I'm
that
glad
up
to hear you
about the
say that.
audiobooks because my stepson is 27 years old. He's actually a pretty inspirational person too. He is a workout buff and loves to exercise and takes really good care of his body. But anyway, the reason I brought him up is he sent me a text message yesterday with two different audiobooks, and he says, "Dude, you've got to listen to these. They are the greatest." And so I've already had it on my list to listen to two audiobooks that he told me about.
Do you remember the titles of them?
I don't, but I got my phone right here. I could pull it up and see.
Yeah.
He texted me last night, and he put in two different options here. See if I can get my phone to work. Okay, so the first one that he sent me was actually the gentleman that just passed away off of Duck Dynasty, and it's called Happy, Happy, Happy by Phil
Mm,
Robinson.
yeah.
And I haven't looked it up yet, but for those don't know Phil Robinson, he was the Duck Dynasty star that just passed away, and he was a very spiritual man, which used his spirituality for a lot of influence for good, which was pretty cool. And then the second one is actually one of my favorite actors of all times, and it's Matthew McConaughey. And the title of this one is Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey.
Mm.
And I think that they're
My wife.
probably motivational speakers more than it is a book, but either way, I think it's going to be worth a listen.
Oh, that'll be cool, man. Yeah, you'll have to tell me how this turned out. My wife just read one by Matthew McConaughey. It was like his biography, and that dude's got a fascinating life, man.
He does. He's an
Yeah.
impressive human being.
Um. All right, my friend. Well, listen, I told you an hour. We're about 8 minutes overdue here, so
Okay.
I want to respect your time. I know you probably got some golfing to go do today,
Well, a little bit
but
later, yep, for sure.
yeah, man. Well, thanks for being on here. Yeah, I really appreciate you doing it, dude. Like
Yeah, you bet.
I said, you feel like your story's not cool, but it's cool.
Well, it's a story and it's my story, so take it for what you want, I
Yeah, man.
guess.
All right. Well, thank you, my friend.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for the
Appreciate
opportunity.
it, man.
You have a great day.
All right, man.
All right,
Go earn your salt, Matt.
will do.
Hey, you've just finished up this episode, and I've got to know, do you know someone who's a getting after it kind of person? Someone who is uh, earning their salt every day? If so, I would like to have them on the show. So have them message me directly at the Go Earn Your Salt podcast on Instagram. Let's see if we can get them on the show. Have a great day. You know what to do. Go earn your salt.